Chapter 6. The Lie of Work-Life Balance. You've been told to find balance. Work-life balance. The perfect equilibrium where career, health, relationships, hobbies, and personal growth all receive equal time and energy. Where nothing is neglected and everything flourishes simultaneously. It's a fantasy, and believing it is keeping you mediocre. Balance is a myth sold to people who want to be great at nothing. The concept of work-life balance assumes equal distribution is optimal, that you should divide your energy evenly across all domains of your life, that if you're not giving equal attention to everything, something's wrong. But extraordinary achievement in any domain requires seasons of imbalance, obsession, and sacrifice. Look at anyone who has done something remarkable, anyone who has built something significant, mastered something difficult, or achieved something extraordinary. They didn't balance, they obsessed. The entrepreneur building their first business worked 80-hour weeks. The athlete preparing for competition trained twice a day while others rested. The artist creating their masterpiece disappeared from social life for months. All of them chose imbalance, deliberately, knowingly, without apology. The people who change industries, break records, and build empires don't balance. They prioritize ruthlessly, and they accept the cost. They understand that excellence requires concentration of resources, that if you spread yourself thin across everything, you'll be adequate at everything and exceptional at nothing. So, they choose. This season, this area gets everything. The rest gets what's left over. That's not dysfunction. That's strategy. But you've been taught that this is wrong, that prioritizing one area means you're unbalanced, unhealthy, heading for burnout. So you try to do it all. You try to excel at your career while being present for every family dinner. You try to build a business while maintaining your workout routine and social life. You try to master a skill while also reading for pleasure, volunteering, and traveling. And you end up stressed, spread thin, making minimal progress in everything. When you try to balance everything, you commit to nothing. You give partial attention to everything and full attention to nothing. You become mediocre across the board because you refuse to acknowledge the reality. Time and energy are finite. You can't have it all at once. You have to choose. But here's what you'll say. I don't want to sacrifice my relationships. I don't want to neglect my health. I want to be successful and balanced. Fine. Let's examine whether you're actually balanced right now. Your life already reflects your true priorities, not the ones you claim in conversation. You say health matters, but you skip workouts when work runs late. You sacrifice sleep for entertainment. Your body is telling the truth about where health ranks in your actual priorities. You say family is everything, but you work through dinners, checking email. You're physically present, but mentally absent. Your calendar is telling the truth about where family ranks. Your calendar and bank account reveal the truth, not your words, not your intentions. Where your time goes and where your money goes, that's your real priority list. Everything else is a story you tell to feel better about your choices. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people claiming to want balance are actually avoiding the clarity of choosing what matters most right now. Balance is often an excuse to avoid the uncomfortable clarity of choosing. Because choosing is hard. Choosing means saying yes to something and no to everything else. Choosing means accepting trade-offs. Choosing means disappointing some people, neglecting some areas, letting some opportunities pass. Balance lets you avoid that discomfort. It lets you pretend you can have everything without sacrificing anything. You can't. The math doesn't work. The hours don't exist. The energy isn't there. And pretending otherwise just guarantees you'll be mediocre at everything instead of excellent at something. You have a choice. You can continue pretending balance is possible. You can stay comfortable with adequacy. Or you can choose. You can accept that extraordinary achievement requires extraordinary focus, that seasons of imbalance are not just acceptable, they're necessary. The protocol demands you choose your season and commit fully without apology. For the next 30 days, you identify the one area that requires disproportionate focus, not forever, not for the rest of your life. Right now, for this season. Maybe it's the business launch. Maybe it's the competition preparation. Maybe it's the relationship repair that determines whether your family stays intact. One thing, the thing that, if you gave it everything for 30 days, would fundamentally change your trajectory. You identify it, and then you give it what it demands. Not what's comfortable, not what's balanced, what it actually requires to succeed. If that means working weekends, you work weekends. If that means saying no to social events, you say no. You communicate boundaries to others. You tell your family, your friends, your colleagues. For the next 30 days, I'm prioritizing this. I'm going to be less available. Some things are going to be neglected. This is temporary. It's necessary. And I need your support. You don't apologize for it. You don't feel guilty. You simply state the reality. This is my season. This is my focus. This is what I'm choosing. And you accept that some things will be neglected because that's the cost. That's always the cost. You can't give disproportionate attention to one area without taking attention away from others. That's not a flaw in your planning. That's mathematics. The question is whether you're willing to accept that cost in exchange for the outcome. Most people aren't. They want the outcome without the cost. It doesn't work that way. Stop pretending you can excel everywhere simultaneously. No one can. The people who appear to have it all went through seasons of extreme imbalance to build what they have now. Nobody starts balanced. Balance, if it exists at all, is something you earn after seasons of imbalance. It's not about trying to do everything. It's about doing one thing completely. Here's your 6th protocol assignment. Declare your season and restructure accordingly. Write down the one area that gets disproportionate focus for the next 30 days. Be specific. One goal, one season, 30 days of imbalance in service of that goal. Then, audit your current schedule. Cancel optional commitments, reduce social activities, minimize entertainment, wake up earlier. Whatever it takes to create the time and energy this priority demands. Then, communicate your boundaries. Tell the people affected. For the next month, this is my focus. I'll be less available. Some things will wait. You don't ask permission. You inform them of the decision you've made. And then you execute. For 30 days, you give this one area everything. You tolerate the discomfort of other areas being neglected. You resist the guilt. You ignore the voice that says you should be more balanced. Because this is what commitment looks like. Not balanced attention to everything. Full attention to the thing that matters most. Right now. At the end of 30 days, you'll have something real, something accomplished. Not because you managed perfect balance, but because you had the courage to choose imbalance strategically. That's the key. Mental toughness isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing. Completely. It's about having the clarity to choose and the discipline to commit to that choice. Without apology. You've learned to act without readiness, to work without an audience, to prioritize without guilt. But there's one pattern that undermines all of this, and it's been active your entire life. Chapter 7. Finish what you start. No matter what. How many things have you started and not finished? Count them. The online courses you bought and watched 2 lessons of. The books you started and abandoned at Chapter 3. The workout programs you began with enthusiasm and quit after 2 weeks. The business ideas you researched and never launched. The projects you started and let die in a half-finished state. How many? If you're honest, the number is staggering. Dozens, maybe hundreds. A graveyard of abandoned intentions stretching back years. And every single one of them is destroying you. Incomplete projects aren't just tasks. They're evidence you present to yourself that you're unreliable. Every abandoned goal is data. Information your brain uses to construct your identity. And right now, the data says you don't finish things, that you start enthusiastically but lack the fortitude to follow through, that your commitments expire the moment they become difficult, or boring, or inconvenient. Every half-finished course is a vote against your own capability. Every gym membership you paid for and stopped using is evidence that you can't be trusted. Every project you let die is proof that you quit. This accumulated evidence creates a self-concept of someone who starts enthusiastically, but lacks the fortitude to finish. And once that self-concept is established, it becomes self-fulfilling. Because when you start something new, you already know, based on your history, that you probably won't finish it. So the motivation is contaminated. From the beginning, there's a voice in the back of your mind saying, "Yeah, but you'll quit this too. You always do. And you do. Because you've trained yourself to." That's the key. Your inability to finish isn't a personality trait. It's not genetics. It's not a lack of willpower or bad luck. It's a pattern you've reinforced so many times that it's become your default response to difficulty. When something stops being new and exciting, you abandon it. When progress slows, you lose interest. When the initial enthusiasm fades and you're left with the grinding middle section where nothing feels rewarding, you quit. And then you start something else, something new, something that promises to be different this time, something that reignites that feeling of possibility. And the cycle repeats. Start, enthusiasm, difficulty, quit. Start something new. You're not building anything. You're collecting evidence of your own unreliability. The gap between intention and completion is where self-respect dies. Think about what happens every time you quit. You made a commitment to yourself. You had a goal, a plan, a vision of who you'd become if you followed through. And then you stopped. You abandoned it. You broke your word to yourself. Most people underestimate the psychological cost of quitting. They think it's just about that one goal, that one project. It's not. Each time you abandon a commitment, you damage the most important relationship you have, the one with yourself. You teach yourself that your word means nothing, that when you say you're going to do something, it's provisional, temporary, subject to change the moment you don't feel like doing it anymore. You erode the foundation of self-trust, the belief that when you commit to something, you'll follow through, that your intentions have weight, that you can count on yourself. And without that foundation, nothing works, because everything meaningful requires sustained effort over time, and sustained effort requires that you believe you're capable of sustaining it. But you don't believe that anymore. You've given yourself too much evidence to the contrary. This is why motivation fades. Not because motivation is inherently temporary, but because you've trained yourself not to trust your own word. So new goals feel meaningless before you even begin. When you start something new now, there's no excitement, no belief, just the hollow recognition that you'll probably quit this too, just like everything else. That's what a history of not finishing creates. Not just abandoned projects, but the death of possibility itself. You have a choice. You can continue this pattern. You can keep starting things you don't finish, accumulating more evidence of your unreliability, making it progressively harder to believe you're capable of following through on anything. Or you can break the pattern, starting now. The protocol requires you to finish one thing before starting anything new. Not 5 things, not everything you've ever abandoned. One thing, the most recent project, habit, or goal you started and didn't complete. Go back through your history. What did you start most recently and abandon? What's the thing that's still sitting there, half done, mocking you every time you think about it? That's your target. For the next 30 days, you resurrect it and complete it. Not perfectly, not impressively, completely. You're not trying to do it better than you originally planned. You're not trying to overachieve or impress anyone. You're trying to cross the finish line, to prove to yourself that you can finish. Maybe it's the online course. You go back, you watch the remaining lessons, you do the assignments, you complete the final project. Even if it's mediocre, even if you've lost interest, you finish it. Maybe it's the book. You pick it back up, you read the remaining chapters, you get to the last page, even if it feels like a chore. You finish it. Maybe it's the fitness program. You restart it from wherever you quit. You complete the remaining weeks. You do every workout, even the ones you don't want to do. You finish it. You cross the finish line even if it's messy, even if no one cares, because finishing builds the identity of a finisher, and that identity is the foundation of everything else. This isn't about the project itself. This isn't about whether the course was valuable or the book was good. This is about proving to yourself that you can complete something, that you can keep a commitment even when the excitement has faded, that you can push through the boring middle and reach the end. This is about installing new evidence, evidence that contradicts the accumulated data of abandonment, evidence that you can finish. And one completion is enough to start. One completed project begins to shift the identity. One finish line crossed starts to rebuild self-trust, because your brain doesn't need you to finish everything perfectly. It needs you to finish something. Period. That's the key. You don't need to go back and finish every abandoned project from your entire life. You need to finish one. Recently. Completely. To demonstrate that you're capable of doing it. Here's your 7th protocol assignment. Identify and complete your most recent abandonment. Right now, before you continue, write down the last thing you started and didn't finish. The project, course, book, program, habit, whatever it is, write it down. That's your only focus for the next 30 days. Everything else waits. You don't start anything new until this is done. No new courses, no new books, no new programs, nothing new until you finish this one thing. You schedule it. You calendar specific time blocks dedicated solely to completing this project. And when those time blocks arrive, you execute. No negotiation. No, I'll do it later. You do it now. When it's boring, you do it anyway. When you're not motivated, you do it anyway. When it feels pointless, you do it anyway. Because this isn't about the value of the project. This is about the value of your word to yourself. And 30 days from now, you will have done something most people can't do. You will have resurrected something you abandoned and finished it. You'll have proof that you're capable of following through. Evidence that contradicts the pattern of quitting. A reference point you can return to when you start something new. And the voice of doubt says, "You won't finish this either." You'll be able to say, "Yes, I will, because I finished the last thing." I'm someone who finishes. It's not about motivation. It's about completion. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's about doing it completely. Because completion changes identity. Every time you cross a finish line, you become more of a finisher. Every time you keep a commitment, you become more trustworthy to yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of mental toughness. Without it, you have nothing. With it, you can build anything. This might be the most important chapter in this entire protocol, because if you can't finish things, nothing else matters. You can learn all the other principles, but if you don't follow through, none of it produces results. So, finish this one thing. Then start the next thing with the identity of someone who finishes. And watch how differently that feels. You've learned to act, to work in silence, to embrace discomfort, to control attention, to abandon proof-seeking, to choose imbalance, and now to finish. But your environment is still sabotaging everything you're trying to build. Chapter 8. Your environment is sabotaging you. You keep trying to fix yourself when the problem is your environment. You set goals. You make commitments. You promise yourself this time will be different. And then you fail. Again. And you blame your willpower, your discipline, your character. But the problem isn't you. The problem is that you're trying to succeed in an environment designed for failure. Willpower is finite, but environmental design is infinite. And most people architect their failure. Here's the reality. Willpower is a limited resource. You have a certain amount of it each day, and every decision that requires self-control depletes it. By the end of the day, your willpower is exhausted. That's when you make the worst decisions. That's when discipline collapses. So if your environment requires constant willpower to make the right choice, you will fail. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. If you keep junk food in your house, you will eat it. Not because you lack discipline. Because at 8 p.m. when your willpower is depleted and you're stressed and tired, the junk food is there, and eating it requires zero resistance. If your phone is within reach during work, you will check it. Not because you're addicted, because every time you hit a difficult point in your task, your brain seeks relief, and your phone is right there offering instant distraction with zero friction. If toxic relationships have easy access to your time, they will drain it. Not because you're weak, because saying no requires energy. And when you're tired or lonely or bored, accepting the call or the text or the invitation is easier than resisting. Relying on willpower to overcome a poorly designed environment is like swimming against a riptide and wondering why you're exhausted. You're not weak, you're just fighting the wrong battle. You're using a finite resource to fight an infinite problem, and you're losing. That's the key. The solution isn't more willpower, it's better design. You remove the need for willpower by designing an environment where the right choice is easy and the wrong choice is hard. You don't keep junk food in your house. Now eating junk requires driving to the store. That's friction. That's enough resistance that most of the time, you won't do it. You don't keep your phone within reach during work. It's in another room or in a drawer or powered off. Now checking it requires getting up, walking somewhere, unlocking it. That friction is enough to break the automatic reach. You don't give toxic relationships easy access. You don't answer every call. You don't respond immediately to every text. You create space, boundaries, friction. Now engaging with them requires deliberate choice, not automatic response. This is environmental design, making the behaviors you want easy and automatic, making the behaviors you don't want difficult and deliberate. And most people have it backwards. They've designed their environment to make bad choices easy and good choices hard. The gym is 20 minutes away, but the couch is right here. Healthy food requires preparation, but delivery is one tap. Focused work requires setup and intention, but scrolling is always available. Your environment is working against you, and you're expecting willpower to overcome it. It won't. It can't. But here's where it gets worse. Because your physical environment isn't the only thing sabotaging you. The people you spend time with are either raising or lowering your standard invisibly. Human beings are social animals. We unconsciously adopt the norms, habits, and expectations of our immediate social environment. This isn't a choice. It's neurological. We are wired to conform to the group. So if you're surrounded by people who complain, procrastinate, and settle, these behaviors become normalized. Your brain registers them as acceptable, even standard, and your own standards drift downward without conscious awareness. You start complaining more because everyone around you complains. You procrastinate more because everyone around you procrastinates. You settle more because everyone around you settles. Not because you decided to, because your nervous system is absorbing the norms of your environment and adjusting your behavior to match. This is why the most disciplined person in a group of undisciplined people still becomes less disciplined. Why the most ambitious person in a group of complacent people still loses edge. Why the healthiest person in a group of unhealthy people still compromises their standards. The group pulls you toward the average, always, unless you actively resist it. And most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're making independent choices. They don't see that their choices are being shaped by the invisible pressure of social norms. Your friends eat out every night, so you start eating out more. Your colleagues complain about work constantly, so you start complaining more. Your family makes excuses for everything, so you start making more excuses. The erosion is subtle, gradual, but it's relentless. You have a choice. You can continue operating in an environment that works against you. You can keep relying on willpower to overcome bad design and social pressure. You can keep wondering why discipline feels so hard. Or you can redesign everything, starting now. The protocol demands a complete environmental audit and ruthless redesign. For the next 30 days, you eliminate friction for desired behaviors and create friction for undesired ones. Start with your physical space. Walk through your home, your workspace, your car. Look for anything that makes bad choices easy or good choices hard. Junk food in the pantry? Gone. Either throw it out or give it away. Your house is not a storage unit for temptation. Phone charger by your bed? Move it. Your phone charges in another room now. You don't start or end your day with a screen. Workout clothes buried in a drawer? They're laid out the night before, ready to go. You remove every obstacle between you and the behavior you want. You remove temptations. Completely. Not, I'll just use willpower to resist them. You eliminate them from your environment. You rearrange spaces. Your work area has nothing in it except what's needed for work. No distractions, no entertainment, just tools for execution. You limit access to distractions. Apps get deleted. Websites get blocked. The friction between you and distraction increases dramatically. This isn't about willpower. This is about making the right choices automatic and the wrong ones inconvenient. Now the harder part. You distance yourself from people who normalize mediocrity. This doesn't mean you cut everyone off. It means you create boundaries. You limit exposure. You stop giving access to people whose influence moves you away from your goals. The friend who always wants to go out drinking when you're trying to get healthy, you see them less. Not because you hate them, because their norm conflicts with your goal. The colleague who complains constantly and encourages you to do the same, you stop eating lunch with them, not because they're bad people, because their standard is lowering yours. The family member who criticizes your ambition and tells you to be realistic, you stop discussing your goals with them, not because you don't love them, because their worldview is contaminating yours. You don't need their permission to protect your environment. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. You simply create distance between yourself and influences that pull you backward. And then you seek out the opposite. You find people whose standards are higher than yours, whose habits you want to adopt, whose norms challenge you to improve. You spend time in environments where discipline is expected, not exceptional, where ambition is normal, not threatening, where high standards are the default because your brain will conform. That's inevitable. The question is what you're conforming to. That's the key. Here's your 8th protocol assignment. Conduct your environmental audit and execute immediate changes. This week, you audit 3 areas. 1. Physical environment. Remove every temptation from your home and workspace. If it makes bad choices easy, it's gone. Rearrange your spaces to support the behaviors you want. Make good choices the default path of least resistance. 2. Digital environment. Delete apps that steal your focus. Block websites that consume your time. Remove notifications that fragment your attention. Your digital space should support execution, not undermine it. 3. Social environment. Identify the 3 people you spend the most time with. Ask yourself, honestly, are they raising or lowering my standard? If they're lowering it, you reduce contact. If they're raising it, you increase contact. These changes happen immediately. Not next week. Not when it's convenient. Today. Because every day you operate in an environment designed for failure is another day of unnecessary struggle. Another day of depleting willpower. Fighting battles you should have eliminated through design. It's not about having more discipline. It's about needing less discipline. It's not about resisting temptation. It's about removing temptation from your environment entirely. The strongest people you know aren't using more willpower than you. They're using less because they've designed their environment so well that the right choices are automatic. You can do the same, but it requires that you stop blaming yourself for struggling in an environment that guarantees struggle, and start taking responsibility for the environment itself. Redesign it, ruthlessly, without apology, without waiting for permission from the people whose influence you're limiting. Your environment shapes you, always. The question is whether you're going to shape your environment first. You've learned to act, to work in silence, to embrace discomfort, to finish what you start, and to redesign your environment. Now we address the invisible structure that determines whether any of this becomes permanent. Chapter 9. The Power of Non-Negotiable Standards. You don't have standards, you have preferences. You'd prefer to eat healthy. You'd prefer to work out regularly. You'd prefer to be disciplined and focused and productive. But preferences aren't standards. Preferences are negotiable. They bend to circumstance, mood, convenience. They're conditional. Active when it's easy, abandoned when it's not. Standards without consequences are just suggestions, and suggestions don't build character. Most people operate entirely on suggestions. I want to be healthier. I should be more disciplined. I need to be more consistent. All of it vague, all of it aspirational, none of it binding. There's no clear line that cannot be crossed, no specific behavior that must happen regardless of circumstance, no standard that holds when everything else collapses. Without non-negotiable standards, every decision becomes a negotiation where emotion, convenience, and circumstance determine outcomes, not values and commitment. Every morning, you negotiate with yourself about whether to get up or hit snooze. Every meal, you negotiate about whether to eat what you planned or what you crave. Every evening, you negotiate about whether to do the work or choose comfort. And because there's no standard, no line that cannot be crossed, the negotiation is always open. Every decision is up for debate. Every commitment is provisional, so you choose based on how you feel. What's most convenient? What offers the least resistance? That's not discipline. That's drift. You're not moving toward anything. You're being moved by whatever force is strongest in the moment. That's the key. Without non-negotiable standards, you have no anchor, no fixed point that holds when everything else is shifting. You're completely subject to conditions, emotions, and circumstances. And that's why you can't build anything lasting, because you don't stand for anything specific enough to defend when it's tested. Think about the last time you broke a commitment to yourself. Maybe you skipped the workout. Maybe you ate the food you said you wouldn't. Maybe you scrolled when you said you'd work. What was the reason? You were tired. It was inconvenient. You didn't feel like it. Something came up. All valid reasons. All completely irrelevant if you had a standard instead of a preference. Because a standard doesn't negotiate. A standard holds regardless of how you feel, regardless of circumstance, regardless of convenience. That's what makes it non-negotiable. Most people are terrified of this. They're terrified of committing to something that doesn't bend, something they can't excuse their way out of when it becomes difficult. Because having a standard means you can fail to meet it. And failure feels worse than never having a standard in the first place. So, they keep everything vague. They keep their commitments flexible. They give themselves room to adjust, to compromise, to redefine success based on what they actually did instead of what they said they'd do. And they call this being realistic, being kind to themselves, being flexible. But what they're actually doing is destroying the foundation of integrity. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching, and nothing external holds you accountable. It's not about public performance. It's not about what you do when people are watching, when there's external pressure, when the stakes are obvious. Integrity is built in the invisible moments, the private decisions, the choices you make when no one will ever know. The moments that define you aren't the public displays of effort. They're the private decisions at 5 in the morning when you're tired, or late at night when no one would know if you skipped the work. It's 5 a.m. The alarm goes off. You said you'd get up and train. No one knows you made this commitment. No one's checking. No one will know if you roll over and sleep another hour. What do? That's the moment. That's where integrity either exists or doesn't. It's 11 p.m. You said you'd finish the task before bed. You're exhausted. The work is tedious. You could just leave it until tomorrow and no one would know. What do? These invisible choices either compound into an identity you respect or erode into one you resent. Every time you keep a commitment, no one's monitoring. You build self-respect. You prove to yourself that your word matters even when no one else will ever know you kept it. Every time you break a commitment no one's monitoring, you erode self-respect. You prove to yourself that your word is meaningless when there's no external accountability. And this compounds in both directions. Keep enough invisible commitments, and you become someone who trusts themselves, someone who knows that when they say they'll do something, it happens, someone whose internal standards are more powerful than external pressure. Break enough invisible commitments, and you become someone who doesn't trust themselves, someone who needs external accountability for everything, someone who can't rely on their own word. That's the foundation you're building every single day. In these invisible moments, you have a choice. You can continue operating on preferences and suggestions, You can keep every commitment conditional, negotiable, subject to how you feel and what's convenient. You can maintain the flexibility that protects you from ever really failing to meet a standard. Or you can establish standards that don't bend. Starting now, the protocol requires you to define 3 non-negotiable standards and track them daily. 3, not 10, not 20. 3 specific behaviors that, regardless of circumstance, you will not compromise on for the next 30 days. These must be specific, not be healthier, not be more disciplined. Specific behaviors you can clearly measure. Maybe it's train every day, no matter what, even if it's just 20 minutes, even if you're tired, even if you're traveling, every single day, without exception. Maybe it's no phone for the first hour after waking. You don't check email, social media, messages, nothing. The first hour of your day belongs to you, not to input from the world. Maybe it's complete the most important task before checking any communication, before email, before Slack, before anything reactive. You complete the one proactive task that moves your goals forward. Whatever your 3 standards are, they must meet 2 criteria. 1, they must be measurable. You can clearly determine whether you did it or didn't do it. No gray area, no partial credit. 2, they must be daily. These aren't weekly goals. These are daily standards that hold every single day for 30 days. You write them down, physically, on paper, not in a note on your phone, on paper that you see every day. And then you track them, daily. Every evening before bed, you check off whether you met each standard. A simple check mark for yes, a simple X for no. You don't need their permission to set these standards. You don't need anyone to approve them, validate them, or hold you accountable to them. These are yours, between you and yourself. And here's what happens. You create a visible record of integrity that proves to yourself you can be trusted. After 1 week, you have 7 check marks next to each standard. That's evidence. That's proof that you can keep your word to yourself for 7 consecutive days. After 2 weeks, 14. After 30 days, 30. That visual record becomes powerful. It becomes something you don't want to break. A streak you don't want to end. Evidence you don't want to contradict. But more importantly, it becomes proof of who you are. You become someone with a 30-day record of keeping non-negotiable standards. Someone who doesn't negotiate with their commitments. Someone whose word to themselves actually means something. That's the key. It's not about the specific standards. It's about becoming someone with standards. It's not about the behaviors themselves. It's about building the identity of a person who doesn't compromise on what they've committed to. Here's your 9th protocol assignment. Define and track your 3 non-negotiable standards. Right now, write down 3 specific, measurable daily standards that you will not compromise on for the next 30 days. Make them challenging but achievable. Make them specific enough that there's no debate about whether you did them. Then create your tracking sheet, a simple piece of paper with 30 boxes next to each standard. Every day for the next 30 days, you mark whether you met the standard. No excuses, no exceptions, no negotiations. If you miss one, you mark it honestly. You don't lie to yourself. You don't give yourself partial credit. You track the truth. Because the point isn't perfection. The point is integrity. The point is creating an accurate record of whether you're someone who keeps their word to themselves. And at the end of 30 days, you'll have data. Clear, undeniable data about who you actually are versus who you say you are. Most people avoid this because they're afraid of what the data will show. They're afraid they'll have more X's than checks, that they'll have proof of their unreliability. But that fear is exactly why you need to do this. Because right now, you're operating on feelings and excuses instead of reality. You have no idea whether you're actually reliable because you've never measured it. This measures it, and measurement creates accountability, even when no one else is watching. You've learned to act without readiness, to work without an audience, to embrace discomfort, to finish what you start, to redesign your environment, to establish non-negotiable standards. Now, we bring everything together into the final transformation. Chapter 10. Becoming Unbreakable. You're not the same person who started this protocol. 30 days ago, you were waiting to feel ready. You were performing for validation. You were avoiding discomfort. You were starting things you didn't finish. You were letting your environment control you. You had no standards that couldn't be negotiated away. That person is gone. Not because you read something inspiring, not because you got motivated, but because you've spent 30 days installing a different operating system, a different way of responding to difficulty, discomfort, and doubt. You've become someone else, someone harder to break. Mental toughness isn't a personality trait. It's a skill set built through deliberate practice under pressure. This is critical. You weren't born without toughness. You didn't lack some genetic predisposition for resilience. You simply hadn't trained it. The unbreakable aren't born different. They've simply accumulated more repetitions of continuing when others quit. Every morning you got up when you didn't want to. That was a repetition. Every time you resisted the distraction when your brain wanted relief, that was a repetition. Every day you honored your non-negotiable standards when circumstances argued against them. That was a repetition. Every time you push through fatigue, resist temptation, or honor a commitment despite not wanting to, you're installing neural pathways that make toughness your default response, not an aspirational trait. Your brain has been rewiring itself. Every repetition strengthened the pathway between discomfort and action, between commitment and execution, between deciding and doing. You've been building neural infrastructure that makes continuing automatic when quitting would be easier. That's the key. Mental toughness isn't something you summon in crisis. It's something you build in ordinary moments so that when crisis comes, the response is already installed. You didn't need a dramatic test. You needed repetition. Boring, unglamorous, daily repetition of choosing the harder path when the easier one was available. And you did it. For 30 days. That's not nothing. That's the foundation of everything. But here's where most people fail. They complete the 30 days. They feel the transformation. They celebrate the achievement. And then they stop. They think the work is done, that they've arrived, that they can relax now because they've proven they're capable. And within weeks, they're back where they started, because they treated this as a temporary challenge instead of a permanent shift. The final test isn't whether you can suffer, It's whether you can sustain excellence when suffering becomes ordinary. Anyone can endure a hard week. Anyone can push through when there's a finish line in sight, when the end is visible, when the achievement feels close. That's not toughness. That's temporary intensity. The question is whether you can maintain standards through hard months, hard years, hard decades, when the newness has faded and no external reward is coming. Can you keep the standards when no one's watching anymore? When the excitement is gone? When it's just you and the commitment, day after day, year after year, with no applause, no recognition, no validation that it matters. This sustainability separates the temporarily motivated from the permanently transformed. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes. It's tied to feelings, circumstances, external stimuli. It burns hot and fades fast. Transformation is permanent. It's a change in identity, not emotion. It's who you are, not how you feel. And the only way to make transformation permanent is to continue the behaviors that created it long after the challenge ends. The protocol ends, but the identity you've built continues, if you choose to honor it. These 30 days weren't about completing a challenge. They weren't about winning a game or proving a point or checking a box. They were about proving to yourself that you're capable of being someone who doesn't quit, someone who acts without waiting for readiness, someone who works without needing an audience, someone who seeks discomfort as curriculum, someone who controls their attention, someone who finishes what they start, someone who designs their environment intentionally, someone who maintains non-negotiable standards. That's who you've been for 30 days. The question is that who you'll be on day 31? You have a choice. You can treat this as a finite challenge, something you completed and can now move past. You can return to your old patterns, your old responses, your old identity. You can let the last 30 days become a memory instead of a foundation. Or you can recognize that you've just built something rare and valuable, and you can choose to protect it, to maintain it, to continue being the person you've proven you can be. The mental toughness you've developed isn't fragile. It's transferable to every domain of your life. The discipline you built, waking up early, that applies to every commitment that requires overriding how you feel. The focus you developed by controlling your attention, that applies to every goal that requires sustained concentration. The integrity you demonstrated by keeping non-negotiable standards, that applies to every area where your word to yourself matters. You didn't just improve in the specific areas you focused on. You installed a response pattern that works everywhere. You now have evidence, not hope. That's what these 30 days gave you. Not inspiration, not motivation. Evidence. Evidence that you can do hard things. Evidence that you can keep commitments when it's difficult. Evidence that you're someone who finishes, who honors their word, who doesn't negotiate with weakness. You've become unbreakable because you've done the work that breaking requires refusing to do. Breaking requires quitting, giving up, abandoning commitments, negotiating standards, choosing comfort over growth. You've refused to do those things for 30 consecutive days. You've chosen the opposite, repeatedly, until it became your pattern. That's not something that can be taken from you. That's not dependent on circumstances. That's an identity you've earned through action. And it's yours to keep or yours to abandon. That's the key. No one can make you maintain this. No one can force you to continue being this person. This protocol ends here. The external structure, the specific assignments, the 30-day timeline. All of that is done. What remains is the choice you make every single day from this point forward. Will you continue choosing action over readiness? Will you continue working in obscurity without needing validation? Will you continue seeking discomfort as growth? Will you continue finishing what you start? Will you continue honoring your standards? Or will you let it fade? Will you return to waiting, performing, avoiding, abandoning, drifting? It's not about the protocol. It's about the person you've become and whether you choose to remain that person. Here's what happens if you continue. This becomes who you are. Not what you do occasionally, not a phase you went through, your identity. You become someone who is reliably tough, who can be counted on to show up, execute, and finish, who doesn't collapse under pressure, who doesn't negotiate with their commitments. And that identity compounds. Every day you honor it, it strengthens. Every challenge you face with this identity active, it deepens. Every year you maintain these standards, it becomes more unshakable. You don't need to be perfect. You'll have days where you fall short, days where you break a standard or abandon a commitment. That's inevitable. But the question is, what do you do the next day? Someone with a temporary mindset uses one failure as permission to quit entirely. One broken day becomes a broken week, becomes a broken month. They return to their old identity because maintaining the new one felt too hard after a single mistake. Someone with a permanent mindset treats failure as a single data point. One broken day is just that, one day. The next day, they return to the standards. They don't use failure as an excuse to abandon the identity. They use it as a reminder of why the identity matters. That's the difference between temporary and permanent transformation. You don't need their permission to continue this. You don't need anyone to validate that maintaining these standards matters. You don't need external accountability or recognition or applause. You just need the decision that this is who you are now. And that decision gets remade every single day. Some days it will feel easy. Some days it will feel impossible. Most days it will feel ordinary, boring, unglamorous. Just you, continuing to do what you said you'd do, with no fanfare and no audience. That's where the unbreakable live. In the ordinary, in the unsexy daily repetition of honoring their word to themselves when no one's watching. You've proven you can do this for 30 days. Now the real question. Will you do it for the rest of your life? Not as a burden, not as constant suffering, but as identity, as who you are, as the baseline that doesn't change regardless of circumstance. You've silenced your weakness for 30 days. You've proven it doesn't control you. You've demonstrated that you can override it consistently when you decide to. Now you get to decide if that was temporary or permanent. The protocol is complete. The identity is built. The choice is yours. Silence your weakness. Not for 30 days. Forever.